Hey, welcome to Stabchats. This is Anatole Stroke, and you are listening to our second episode. Like I've said online and in the previous episode, I'm not sure if this is going to be a regular thing or just a pickup thing. We do have some plans for an SQBC one. I guess that's the closest we got to set in stone, but this may be all there is. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be recording this episode with two of my really good buddies. We are sponsored and hosted on Warlord Sports, warlordsports.com. I think they just started selling these past couple weeks pants, which I know Brennan's very excited about for, what is it, like $60, $70?
$65.
$65, and then a tunic, right? And the deal behind them is they're like quality, rugged fighting tunics, right? And pants. So, again, the idea behind this podcast is to talk to people that have a common interest and passion in this game that we play, and through capturing the organic discussion that goes on with these people, hopefully somebody out there will be inspired or given some kind of insight into, I don't know, some aspect of the game. Maybe it's fighting, maybe it's something else that they were previously lacking, or renewed vigor even. So, like I said, today, it's Christmas Day, and we are in the Crown Lands of Dragonspine, Las Cruces, New Mexico. As I said, I have two guys very close to me. The first is Squire, I don't know, you're like noble.
I don't remember it either. I don't
Count
care.
Squire.
Count. Not Duke, because I haven't actually been king, but
Kick-ass Duke.
Count.
something
Jester
I do.
Nine Tones Stroke, right?
Yes.
That's it, Tony. And last but not least, we have Sir Randall and Dulsa. How are you guys?
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, buddy. Thank
Getting
you for this
sleepy.
whiskey.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm not drinking. I'm going home too soon.
Right on.
I'm pathetic with alcohol.
So we were going to have, and I might have mentioned it online on ESAM, which I forgot if I did or not, but we were going to have Warlord Thedro out of Thor's Refuge, Sacramento, California, I think, in the Confederacy of West March. Unfortunately, he's down here in Las Cruces visiting family. He couldn't swing it, and I know how that goes. I'm currently coming down from Wormspire. Shout out to Wormspire, Santa Fe, New Mexico, the best shire in all of Amtgard. And you just get tied up with family and friends. And then we were going to have Warlord Shion, but I'm not sure what he's doing. He stopped by for a little while.
Gave us some cookies.
He gave us some Christmas cookies, spread some Christmas cheer, and had to jet. So, to preface this podcast, we've been fighting a lot since I got down here into Las Cruces, 4 days ago?
Yes. It was Thursday.
Right, and we've been just running fighter practices every day. And how many of those did you hit, man? Random.
3 of them. It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
And we started earlier on Saturday, too.
And you're still out of commission, aren't you?
I'm still completely gimped.
Yeah, because of your knees, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Gumpy.
Gumpy.
You're gumped out, man.
Telefemoral pain syndrome is what they call it. It just hurts like old-ass man knees.
Are you doing physical therapy for that?
Every other day.
How much of that do you think was Amtgard induced?
I have connective tissue problems, I always have, which explains a lot about my body, so it was probably bound to happen to me. But since the only sport I do really has been Amtgard, I started jogging a bit, but I wasn't jogging long enough nearly for that to be the problem. It was actually renewed interest in fighting that started tearing my body apart. Sucks, because I wasn't athletic until I didn't really even try too hard until I was 25, and by then my body was so set in being a sedentary lump of crap.
Was that when me and you started living together?
It's around the time that I started you were at the park and I started coming back out to the park when I had the job with you, and people who wanted to try and weren't just assholes to everybody, and people who wanted to better themselves in every way and grow as a group instead of the egomaniacal, cock-blocking, pushing
Right.
setup that seemed to be the thing before when I was playing Amtgard before I had to quit for work.
Sure. And now, like, since you've kind of had this time, and I know, like, I have tinnitus in my right elbow, and my right knee has been feeling the effects of Amtgard. What would you suggest as far as like maybe some strengthening exercises or some stretching that maybe up and coming fighters? Because when I was up and coming, I didn't know shit about kind of taking care of my joints. I just went out and fought like 6 hours at a time.
What I did is, so I was given physical therapy stuff of using the foam roller to stretch out the muscles and the tendons and the ligaments and all that nonsense on the side of your leg.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone keeps saying it's the IT band that starts pulling stuff out of alignment. I can't for the life of me remember what the hell that stands for. And then doing isometric leg work, like just doing leg lifts and keeping your foot straight and strengthening the knee or the quadriceps. Because with more weight being carried by them, you're putting less impact on the knees.
Right.
And less likely to jack yourself up the way I have.
You've been also kind of in the same boat at some time or another, haven't you, Ben?
Well, it's always strange injuries like twisting an ankle or twisting an elbow.
Only injuries you'd only get playing
Amtgard.
foam bats in the park.
I was always pretty lucky about that because my doctor is Byron's mother.
Right.
So I'd be able to go to her, and instead of having to explain the whole foam sport thing to someone as like some sort of sports injury or something, you would just say, hey, I hurt my elbow playing Amtgard. I overextended it across some dude's shield, and she would know what was going on, and she could always get some proper exercises to fix those things.
Yeah.
I lied to a lot of doctors and said it was a screma. When I got gouged in the eye by Ilmarin a couple years back, it was a screma.
Right.
I was taking a scream at the same time.
Which
so
also makes you sound a bit more like manly, right? If you actually camouflage it under the guise of some kind of valid martial art or sport, right?
I don't know, the whiny bitch
That's
I
what
was
I
after I
do.
got gouged in the eye, I wouldn't have sounded like I did anything.
I just say, oh yeah, martial arts.
I wasn't really worried about the whole manliness part of it. The part that really worried me is having a doctor.
No.
Yeah, having a gay doctor. No, having a doctor who had no idea what I was talking about, and I tried to explain an Amtgard injury to them.
For sure,
and they
definitely.
wouldn't understand what I was trying to say. So it was really helpful having someone who understood what it was I was saying.
For sure.
I was more worried about somebody referencing that fucking movie Role Models, because then I'd put out their eye and I just didn't want to deal with posting bail and all that shit.
Wasn't it one of the California groups, like a bunch of extras in that movie? I keep hearing that around, but I don't know if there's like a validity to that rumor.
It's
Like
probably one of those
Wave
rumors-
Haven or something.
There was some other movie that there was people out on the West Coast. They were
Yeah.
extras in, but it was similar. Yeah.
So, as I said, we've been doing a lot of fighter practices once we come down, which is great because you get to fight with your bros that you don't normally fight with. But for me, I tried to fight. I think I did all 4 or 5 days in a row. And Warlord Thedro is there. I got to fight Sir Firespitter and Cade during that time. Warlord Shion, all those guys saying you. What do you guys, when you're looking at like an event or even a fighter practice or a park day, do you set goals for yourselves at the beginning of that park day? Is there something like in your mind that you're going to try and strive for or try and do that day? Or do you just kind of autopilot?
I'm not as driven as the Warlords, the people you mentioned, when I do it. When I do it, I tend to go out with a very loose goal, and in the first 5 or 6 fights with somebody of higher caliber than me, I try to make a goal of, I will not fall for that bullshit again.
So it's very reactionary.
It's very reactionary. Like if I notice you're doing your head bob side and then sidestep inside sword shot, it's going to piss me off. So I'm going to make a goal. Don't fall for that one anymore today. So if I can block it a few times in the day, and I can actually find the tell that tells me what's coming and how it happens, just figuring out that tell is enough to make my day better.
Sure. What about you, Randall?
At events, not so much. At events, it's always gravitating towards the end of the ditch where there's a lot of warlords fighting, because that's where you're going to find a lot of good, useful information when you're fighting people. At regular Amtgard, I find that I just know right away when someone hits me with a shot. It's like right away it just clicks in my head. I can see the movement that was wrong, the fake that I fell for, something like that, and I start to like sort of think, well, what am I doing there that was a mistake, and how can I improve on that? So those are the kind of goals, but it's not as... I guess I come from the same perspective that Tony, the Jester, was talking about, that not being Warlord or Warlord driven, the focus is on small improvements. And I don't know if as a Warlord you think the same way, that you look for the really small improvements, but I look for like these manageable bites of what is it that I did wrong at this moment right here, or what is it that I did right at this moment right here that I can take and go forward with.
Well, I mean, I think that as a warlord and a sword knight, I think something Brennan said, like, really strikes true with that question, is that when you're not, or, you know, even when you are a warlord, you're always looking at somebody else. So you're always looking at this other guy and saying, well, if I can only be better than that guy, right? That's going to put some kind of level in my mind or tier about where I'm at. So yeah, I think it still sticks with you. I think, though, once you, not necessarily, and this was something I was talking about Firespitter about, where he was very concerned about losing his competitive edge as he gets older. You know, he just doesn't feel the fire anymore. And maybe that's a little bit more, I don't know, telling of our award system. Like, maybe it sets a standard up that you feel you have to constantly hit or strive for.
He might be an interesting person to talk about with regards to
Oh,
the award
fuck
system,
yeah.
because he came up in a strange way through the Burning Lands.
Yeah, I would love
think-
to talk to, like, all those guys.
I think that he was something at like Six Swords of the Warrior when they knighted him, and it was because he was just doing so well, and they realized in the Burning Lands, in their particular situation, that he had been left behind by the award system, and they said, nope, Sword Knight, and they went ahead and they fixed that. So he might be an interesting person to come up from that perspective.
Well, I'm talking to him now, and I hope that if Pat listens to this, I apologize if I'm overstepping any boundaries or anything, but I've talked to Pat now and been like, well, dude, why aren't you a warlord? And he said that he tells monarchs he doesn't want it. He said for him, he doesn't want that target on his back anymore. He's not young anymore. And at first it was a lot of spite because of politics or whatever was keeping him from getting it, he felt. So, but nowadays it's more of just like, you know, he doesn't feel like he wants to put himself in that position.
Well, you were talking about the competitive edge, but I think that even just, you know, the other commonality we really share is MMA. You could put that competitive edge. So you have your Randy Coutures and your Chuck Liddells, who were gods of their time, but the human body can only take so much crap for so long. And while this isn't as high impact, obviously, as that, you know, there's still enough wear and tear on your body. My knees, your elbow, Ben's, whatever the hell he's talking about today, example enough of the human body only taking so much of it before you start falling apart. Yeah, your competitive edge is there, and your brain may want it, but the flesh is weak. I mean, we all watched Liddell and Couture, like, you know, forcing that competitive edge in themselves, but it's not there anymore. It may not be there. Your time may come and go. You also have, you know, examples like John Wayne, the shootist, where he, you know, old retired gunfighter, and people are still gunning for him even though he's way past his prime and doesn't even care anymore, but no one will leave him alone. So he still has to show his stuff, but that's what you're going to end up with at your high competitive levels. Because once you start getting older and fatter and slower, you're going to have to deal with it, and you're going to have to listen to it, and the ravages of time are going to win.
I guess the point, and I mean, obviously, I haven't taken guys fighting past 30 class because I'm not quite there yet.
They should.
But did you take that, man?
I did.
You did.
They should actually. They were talking about advertising it as keeping your, because it was a lot of it was the mental game and keeping yourself fit so you don't have to be a broken ass old man trying to recover. A lot of it was how to prevent it, things you can start doing. But by then, my knees were already pretty messed up. You saw me limping around SKBC and Clan. They were talking about that, and they also talked a lot about the mental game and like the days where you have a really good day when you're not in pain, where you just run roughshod all over somebody and make sure you can keep that bullshit lie fire in your eyes so that they're still afraid of you even when they have no reason to be because it hurts you to walk.
Interesting.
But they really talked about advertising it more as a keeping yourself from being old and broken, or what to do if you got old and broken.
I wonder if that's an older generation thing. I don't mean like older chronologically, but I mean like a 90s generation thing. I feel like a lot of the fighters, a lot of the prime fighters in this century are older than they were in the 90s. And I wonder if the way that Amtgard fighting was in the 90s lent itself more towards becoming broken, towards breaking down as a physical person. Whereas now you can have fighters that go well into their 30s and much later that are going to be physically in pretty good condition for a much longer time. I wonder if Amtgard has changed.
But a lot of people came in just really schlubby nerds because this is what we started as. This was our first physical activity for a lot of us. We didn't do tennis, we didn't do football, we didn't do baseball. A lot of us were like, the jocks are picking on me, and we'd never do any of it. We passed gym out of participation awards.
You know who I find like totally comes to mind when you say that? I don't know how old Axgar is, but
He's gonna be like late 30s, yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I fucking love that guy. Love Mark. But, you know, I think Matt kind of has more of a what would you say, Ben? Like, he really advertises being, you know, older but still willing to kick ass. Or the Axgar, he really, you know, like, I've seen that guy, like, really hurt sometimes. Like, I think I saw him, like, get his arm, no, not his arm, his hand broken. And it, like, swelled up. And it was at SKBC, I think, when we were back out east. But he sure as shit didn't let it stop him. He was still, like, plunking kids into the ground. In, like, solid Mark fashion, you know. And he's been fighting since, like, 80s, right? In
Late
BL?
80s, yeah.
Well, Guy even brought that kind of stuff up in the Fighting Over 30. If you're broke and your body's saying stop, because your body's going to get worse if you keep doing that.
Axgar is just a savage.
But you're talking about the broken in the 90s setup. It's also, you know, you also end up setting your own demons. He talked about getting in somebody's head and making the demons. Like, you know, every time I fight Anatole, I have to push this back. You know, he kicked the crap out of me for the 5 years we lived together, and I didn't put enough effort in to get that much better. I should have, but I didn't. But if I had, I wouldn't look at him and go, shit, how do I deal with him? So I've got to fight my own mental block well before I even fight him.
So
I'm a little off topic, sorry.
no, that's fine. That's what it's about, dude. Just see where this thing goes. People listen to it, cool. If not, it's whatever. I'll keep it. I'll listen to it. Fuck. So how do you guys, you know, you guys talked about being very reactionary in your goal setting and maybe coming out with, would you say almost like a blank slate and seeing kind of what happens and then almost counter-striking mentally against certain opponents?
Almost. It's more of a go out on the week and say, this is the person here who's not supposed to beat me, and make it so for that weekend. So, sort of reactionary, but it's coming off the previous week.
Right. Does that change? Do you find that like changing a lot while you fight in the course of an hour or the course of an event, course of a fighter practice? Does that tend to that mental process? Do you ever like start being like really proactive, like where okay, so I am beating this guy up, or I'm doing really well with this, and switch it up, maybe try and take the initiative?
For me, it depends on who you're fighting. Like there's some people that I fight where you know that face-off moment where you're doing that sort of like watching each other and you're twitching a little bit and you sort of realize at some point they know what I'm going to do or I know what they're going to do, and then suddenly realize this shot that I'm thinking about is going to work. Then it starts to change a little bit. That's when it hits it for me that I realize that I sort of adapt to the situation. But otherwise, it's very much sort of setting myself my own limitations and my own boundaries of what I'm going to try to accomplish for that week.
Right. And do you guys find yourself taking away consistent things that you need to work on? I mean, we could all work on like footwork or defense or closing, right? Being aggressive, but do you guys find things more consistently than others that you keep taking away? Like, man, all right, so I got this far doing this. I could really work more on it. Or do you guys kind of say, all right, I'm done with this for a while. I'm going to go to another goal.
I do it a lot like studying in high school where you have, 45 things to memorize. You break it into little groups. So I'll memorize the first 10, and then I've got them down. So I've got the first 10 down font. So I'm going to go to the next 5. But while we're reviewing the next 5, I'm going to shuffle in the previous 10. So I make sure I'm doing 15 at a time now, but I'm only adding 5. And I keep adding to it. I need to make sure to step to shield side when I'm opening my guard a little bit more so they have less to hit, or keeping my feet from not crossing. Then I just have to keep reminding, like I'll throw in one reminder or one mixed in flashcard for the old stuff along with the new stuff, because just building without those fundamentals I'm trying to put in place is just useless.
I don't know if you think this way as a much higher end fighter, but I find that as a sort of middle fighter that there's a lot to think about in a fight. And as where I am as a fighter, I find that my brain often doesn't keep up with the fight very quickly. So I often find that when a fight ends, if it goes well, I have a pretty good idea of what went on. But if it goes poorly, I also have a pretty good idea of what went on. I know that, well, these are the one, two, or three things that I didn't think about or forgot about during the fight, and it's very seldom a surprise, but it's always just like, well, why didn't I think about those? And that's the hard hurdle to get past of knowing that these are the things that went wrong, these are why they went wrong, but I just was not thinking about them during the fight. And it didn't occur to me until afterwards that bam, everything fell apart, that I realized, oh yeah, I should have been thinking about those things and not done what I did. There's not many points I find where there's a surprise of what happened.
Yeah, my biggest problem, I feel in regards to that is I'm a pretty adaptive guy. I think that's one of my strengths lie in that, to be honest, the majority of my sword and board, which is definitely my strength, my strong style, really kind of relies on counter striking people a lot and forcing them to act first. But like I was going against Thedro a lot this week in Insane Florentine, which is definitely one of my weaker styles. And it was almost like I kept falling into a pattern. If I would lose, because I didn't feel that confidence there in the style, I would kind of fall back into, well, if I could just get this one thing, or if I can just, I don't know, land this one shot, then my practice tonight would be valid. Whereas, like, retrospectively, looking back on those fights, when I did well was when I was just kind of like not putting that pressure, maybe having one simple goal, you know, but allowing myself to not fall into a mental rut. You know what I mean? More of like allowing myself to be open to whatever Thedro would tell me without, you know, just by fighting him, rather than focusing on myself so much. I don't know if that makes sense.
Do you feel like you get derailed ever when you're trying to practice or fight?
Totally. I think it happens less and less as you get better, because as you get better in a certain style, or just at fighting in general, you don't feel as derailed because you can easily set the timing, you can set the pace, you can set the course of events for a fight. Whereas if you're not so good, or you're trying to learn a new style from front to end like I am with Florentine, you start fixating on little things. Like you start looking at it more as like, well, my defense, rather than, well, what's my offense and defense? How do they complement each other? How does my footwork complement my feints? You know, instead of looking at the larger picture, you fall down like a rabbit hole and you get stuck there for anywhere between like 10 to 15 to 20 fights before you really start pulling yourself out and being like, oh, okay, hold on. Now I'm becoming predictable. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I guess that brings us more into the next question I have, as far as winning versus just the process of fighting or the process of improvement. Honestly, what do you guys feel like your biggest goal fighting is?
I don't do a lot of tourney fighting. This is a problem with me not having the Warlord drive or any of that. I end up reaving them because we need decent reaves, and God help our park sometimes. But to me, it's more, have I learned from what I was doing? It's just another learning, and I treat it more personal growth. Did I learn from what I did today? If I'm at a point where I'm not going to be learning because it's just people who are just god-awful or just having off days, did I at least teach them something? Was knowledge exchanged in one way or the other there? That's all I really care about at the end of it. Mm-hmm. If I don't learn something, they'd better learn something. And if neither one of us learned anything, we were all just kind of wasting our time.
Right. What about you, Randall?
I'm 36. I started fighting 20 years ago, and I'm kind of at a point now where unless I significantly change the way that I approach Amtgard combat, I'm talking about getting better or worse by degrees, not by like like magnitudes, but just by small degrees. But I do kind of think that improvement within that range is possible, and I think that winning and process kind of go hand in hand. That sometimes you'll be thinking about something that you want to improve, like as a shot that you want to figure out or a block that you want to figure out, and figuring it out means you kill the other person. That suddenly something works and bam, you stab somebody, and like, I just figured that shot out and killed them in the process of doing so. And it rarely happens the other way too, where you're working on some other block or something, or some shot or something, and it still works, and you end up walking away from the fight not as the victor of the fight. But I find that they often translate into significant improvement, that when you're thinking about, I would like to do this better or this better, it results in something happening during the fight itself.
So how conscious of you, like on a regular basis, and you're pretty dedicated to Amtgard in general, how conscious of you are, like, of your age?
Not at all.
Not at all?
No, just the only consciousness that I get in of age is that I sort of regret the time that I fought when I was 16 years old, because there's a lot of mistakes that those first 4 or 5 years I fought playing Amtgard, and then I took a break for a while, but those first 4 or 5 years, there are things that I've never unlearned from that time. And it would have been nice to go back and say, don't do those things.
Right.
Because
High cross?
the high cross, or like, I fought with a real small shield when I was a kid, so that's why I moved my shield around so much. So I wish I could have said, don't do those things, but as far as like any kind of, well, you know, you're 36, you're starting to break down, I don't feel that way. I feel like, I feel it's important to approach Amtgard as though you are fine, because it's not that old, 36. I think that Amtgard is a rigorous sport, but in high professional sports, this is about the age people start to say, you know, I can't do this anymore, I'm starting to break down, I can't keep up with the younger people. I don't think Amtgard is that way.
Well,
I think that there's many things you can do with regards to your physical strength and your cardio that make you just as functional as anyone else. So it never occurs to me that there's any difference between me and anybody half my age on the field.
Well, your high-end sports that you're talking about, these are people who are doing it 4 to 9 hours a day, every day, if not 5 to 7 days a week. Well, kind of redundant, but...
Wouldn't that be fucking crazy, though, if, like...
For Amtgard?
For, you know, and I mean, I still fight on a very regular basis, even though my role has kind of turned into bringing up the guys in Wormspire and getting them better. But could you imagine if, like... you got paid to basically do Amtgard 8 hours a day.
It's just the difference of treating it like, you know, a once or twice thing to a hobby that you really want to get better at.
For sure.
If I paint, I'm not getting better at painting by doing it once to twice a week. I have to sit down and do it for 3 to 4 hours a day, 5 to 7 times a week. It's any hobby or anything you want to get good at.
I want to talk about something that Brennan said once, and that something you're doing in Wormspire that reminds me of this as well. It was at SKBC, and Brennan was showing us some shots, and it was like, I think it was like hand matching or something, like left-handed, and I said, well, this is something that's sort of beyond me. I can't do this because I have thinner arms than you do, and I can't really do anything about that. And he says, well, no, you could. And it was a very valid point, that if you really wanted to get better at something, you could build up your physical strength, you could improve your physical strength.
I like that, no, you're wrong is a valid point.
It was a very valid point that, given the physical condition that I'm in now, or that someone in that situation would be in, there'd be some limitations on what they could do, but if somebody wanted to improve, they could add physical workout to their routine, not just go out there and swing foam, but actually do physical training. And that sounds like something you're doing in Wormspire as well. When you're not able to fight, you're doing like squats and whatnot, or working on like your explosive strength to not only translate into physical fitness, but it has an impact when you're playing Amtgard as well. That when you improve your physical capabilities, your own health, it has an actual impact.
Yeah, you know...
and you're doing some pretty good exercises up there, aren't you?
Yeah, and a lot of it for me is getting into, like, mixed martial arts and just kind of really getting into fitness and exercise in general up there. But one of the things that I told Sane when we had a good manly, a bromance, heart-to-heart at Maze was he wanted me to kind of critique his style, or, you know, he just wanted some tips. And Sane, I feel, is coming up and getting pretty good. But the one thing I told him today is, or back then, excuse me, is that, you know, he was having a problem with letting people get into his head as far as opponents, me especially, I feel like. And I'm not gonna lie, that's one thing that I specifically try and do. Like, I try and grin a lot when I'm fighting and laugh and kind of shrug it off, and part of that's me just having a really good time. Like, rarely is there ever anything I would rather be doing, which kind of makes me a man-child, I guess, but whatever. But I also, if I can feel that, and it's something you can feel, an opponent that you are dominating, is that they let you into your mind, and you can kind of almost take up residence there and start, you know, doing things that throw them off, like acting a little silly, you know. It may be a dick move, but whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, but to continue, one of the things I told him was he lets people into his mind, and he should start doing about 50 squats every day, and then 20 lunges. And, you know, fighting him these past 3, 4, 5 days, and I think he fought all 4 days because we fought yesterday too. It's made a difference. It really has. I feel like watching guys like Leaf or Spin. I mean, those guys were athletic guys to begin with. That shows. It really, really shows. Or watching somebody like Balisk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that guy's an athletic guy. He may not be, or Klolobus, I guess, is the best example because wasn't he like some kind of Olympic level pole vaulter or some shit like that? It shows, and there's definitely an advantage.
Well, you and Charles are both good examples of it. If you look at your fighting capability now and your physical fitness 3 or 4 years ago, I think that in both your cases it's a pretty dramatic improvement.
Yeah, I was a fat bitch.
In both areas. Like,
Further back than that, before we started doing Kung Fu and Eskrima regularly.
Right, yeah.
When you were, just based on you and I living together, is when you started doing Eskrima, so that's 6 years ago.
Well, and in the last, not to toot my own horn, but in the last, 2.5 years, I've lost, almost 50 pounds now,
well, both of you. Charles is no slouch in that department either.
Oh,
both
definitely.
of you,
He looks good
both of
for
you,
a man.
nice looking
whatever.
gentleman.
He's no GSP, but
Both
I
of
would
you,
think about making out with him. If
both of
nothing
you have
else.
trimmed down a lot and also upped your fighting. Like the physicality and the grace of your fighting has gone up a great deal and it's had a magnificent impact.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much. Did you have anything else you want to say on that, T-Bone?
Nah, we're already past that point, so no.
Okay. I should also, for those that don't know, this podcast is kind of cool for me because Sir Randall was my knight, and I was your page first, even though I wanted to be a man at arms.
Oopsie.
Because I thought a page was a girl's belt, but you gave it to me anyways. And
I think baronet just to make you feel better.
right, the girl's title. But I think at 18, right?
Mm-hmm.
You gave me a squire's belt, and Jester is your squire now.
Correct.
And one of the things that I always liked, and I always thought, yeah, this guy's my knight. Even though fighting ways I may have surpassed you, a ways back or whatever. And there were the Fauchons and Brennans out there that I could have went and asked for a squire's belt for. But something that you said in regards to your age just a little while ago that always stuck with me in advice is you said you should treat every day that you go out to the park like it's your first day to the park, right? And you always have that that wonder and that kind of just holy shit, I'm at Disneyland kind of feeling. There's so much, I can't do it all, but I'm gonna try. And Randall, that's something I've always really looked up to you for, and I still do. Is that you? I mean, I think at the park this last Saturday, when Cade and Firespitter and everyone was here, we went all off and we're doing first to tens and winners to losers and ditching, and you were in this battle game just screaming at kids, but in a good way, and you had. like a doofy, what was that? Like a 15-pound bow and a fucking Robin Hood hat.
Yep.
Look the part.
Shooting kids in the butt and
I blame,
screaming and running away.
I blame Brendan for this.
Oh my god, it was awesome. Mm-hmm. But that to me, I mean, I know it sounds creepy when I say it like that, but to me it was just fuck yeah, Ben. Still whooping ass, still kicking ass. Do you still feel that way? Mm-hmm. A lot of the time?
I think that, especially in the last five or 6 years, I think there have maybe been 1 or 2 weeks of Amtgard that haven't been just phenomenal for me. That every week I go out, I have an excellent time.
Yeah.
As a hermit, I'm not as enthusiastic towards that. I've never been wired that way. But to be honest, even days where I'm I don't want to be here, I don't want to leave the house, I'm just going to go there to go to Taco Bell with Ben, and I still have a good time. It's kind of hard not to. I mean, I've grown more socially because of this game. I mean, it's where almost every one of my friends comes from in a way.
It's almost like a workout in that regard, right? Sometimes you don't want to work out, but as soon as you get it done, you're always oh, that was a good idea.
Yeah, I need to get out of the house. That was a great idea. Hey, they invited me to go out and do more stuff out of the house. Well, I want to go. Screw it, I had fun. I'm going to go do some more of this. Even if it's not, swinging around shooting kids in the butt with a Robin Hood hat.
It was so cool, man. It was so. We were all, on the other side of the field. I think we were doing hold the middle, and Cade as he usually does when we all get together, he's like, all right, first one to 10 rows in a row, excuse me. After that, we can go ditch. So we were, it was samurai time. We were fucking getting competitive as shit and giving each other the mad dog as we'd go fight one-on-one. And then every once in a while, you'd hear Ben like, get him. Oh, you're dead. Oh, God, no, don't do it. Just running around with that goofy Robin Hood hat on. It was...
Get a real goddamn bow, too.
It was... I don't think you need to.
Income.
I don't think you need to, Ben.
No.
No way, man. Yeah, it's like I said, it's something I've always looked up to you for, man.
Well, I hope it's something other people do. I think it's a good way to approach the park because people will often remember, it's the way memory works. You remember the first time you did something and you remember the last time you did something, but all the stuff in the middle is kind of hazy. And that first couple of weeks you're out in Amtgard, I know for me, but for a lot of other people as well, you have this sort of feeling of, I've been looking for this as long as I've been alive. This is what I've been wanting to do the whole time I've been alive, and then you suddenly get to do it. And I think approaching Amtgard with that attitude every single week, you're going to have a good time.
Well, Isaac, wasn't most of your early staying power? Wasn't most of that out of spite against people who were just dicks when you were a kid?
Yeah, I mean...
I remember you mentioned one through, I don't know if I'm going to name drop or not, but...
Right, yeah, I was a really kind of like an angry kid, which ultimately, I think Amtgard was a really good place for me. But at the time, I was kind of an angry kid, and...
I thought you were 25.
Yeah, you thought I was a lot older. It's only because you can't grow a beard, dude. I was growing one at 12.
Yeah.
Suck it.
Yep.
But, yeah, I mean, a lot of people out there were... I think it was just a different culture, and it wasn't very inviting towards new people. And I think out of the 6 people that started with me, I was the only one that stayed, maybe with the exception of Finn, and although he started later than me.
He also kept the spite fucking around. There was a lot of his drive.
Yeah, I mean, eventually it just came down to, obviously these people want me to go. I remember, throwing the Dagger of Infinite Penetration at Kershan one time, and I'm, getting so mad that me, this 14, 15-year-old kid, killed him with a stupid throwing dagger that he got up and, threw it across the battlefield. And at the time, I just felt so good about that.
I think it's a much more common attitude towards Amtgard than what we have now at our park. I think most of Amtgard, well, I don't say most, but much of Amtgard is that way. That much of Amtgard has this attitude of people don't understand that there's an appropriate way to interact with adults, there's an appropriate way to welcome people to Amtgard, there's an appropriate way when you're I don't know how old he was at the time, but 30-something and some 14-year-old kid throwing daggers to respond to that situation. And in Amtgard, for much of Amtgard, that way of responding is to have a tantrum or to yell at them or to scream or throw something in a tree or what have you. And I don't think that's right.
Or creepily hit on them.
Sure.
Which, the poor new girl at the park, last week.
I think that we do something a little bit differently, I think.
Do you think that Amtgard in general is doing better?
Amtgard in general? I would guess no.
Why do you say that?
Because Amtgarders are basically Amtgarders. I think that for a lot of Amtgarders, they are not very good at interacting with human beings. And they don't understand the way that you're supposed to treat people, and that they learn the wrong lessons from when they come to Amtgard. I think a lot of Amtgarders come to Amtgard, and the lessons that they learn, the geek social fallacies. I think the lessons that they learn are when someone screws up, young or old, whatever, scream at them, have a tantrum, and throw your weight around, talk about how long you've been in the game. Those are the lessons they learn. Instead of thinking to themselves, wow, these people are dickheads, the way that I'm supposed to respond now when I grow up is I'm not supposed to treat people the way that I was treated. I think most people take that first lesson, not the second lesson, and I think that happens all over the game. I think you have tons of Amtgarders that are just so dysfunctional in the way that they approach people that they raise generations of Amtgarders that are going to be just like them.
Yeah, vicious cycle. Definitely. So... to go on kind of get away from the fighting aspect of this podcast, do you think that Amtgard is dying?
No.
Then? Why not?
Well, there's tons of people who play. I think there's more now than there were ever before. When we work out our numbers, when we talk about there being 300 people who play per week in just one kingdom, 600 per month, maybe 1,200 per year or so, and you work that out across 14, 15 kingdoms, you're talking thousands of people who are playing, and I think it's continuing to expand.
So do you think that maybe this kind of vicious cycle that we're talking about doesn't kill us so much as it holds us back.
It's kind of a trade-off. I remember back in the day here, you did have these people who were just very bad at running organizations, and they were very bad at treating kids. But what they were good at doing is they were exceptionally accommodating of other shitheads and of other people who were just not very good with people and of other people who were just social outcasts. You had this whole conglomerate of people who were just not useful. They were just not very good with people. They were not very good in society, and there were tons of them. And none of them got along, but they were all there. And that's the way that Amtgard was. So in individual parks, things may have been larger, what have you, but...
So how much of that goes into what you feel is a responsibility of yourself as a knight?
Well, the most important lesson that I took from growing up in all of that is this is not how you treat people. And that everything that I felt as like a teenager in Amtgard is not what you're supposed to inflict on other people who are growing up in the game. The big lesson that I learned is that when you have people who are 16, 17, 18 years old, what have you, in Amtgard, you're supposed to accord them some basic decency and try to teach them a different lesson.
I'm turning 31 next week. I remember when I started, I was 14.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, buddy.
Yep. I'm in my 30s now. One of my earliest memories of this stupid game, and there were some people, like, I don't remember this dark time. I remember there were assholes, of course, but there were some pretty okay people. One of my earlier memories in the entire damn game is, it was some god-awful fucking quest. I don't remember how the hell we ever thought these things were good back then. But it was, like, Bulgarian was hilarious to that, and Theodore were off as giants or something, and... like, half of that made sense, but I was 14 and I wasn't Kevin's height yet. That happened like 6 weeks later. But, like, I was already decided that I was a Kender or something. And I remember, like, Theodore, people, like, gave him this bad rep as, I think it was Corsairs back then. And, talk about him being mean or something. I don't ever remember this guy being mean to me. I remember him, like, taking the role play, picking me up and throwing me over his shoulder and then running off with me like I was a sack of fucking potatoes. And this guy who people were talking about mean was nice to this scrubby, acne-filled, 90-pound weakling. I wasn't even 90 fucking pounds. And people like that were nice to me. So I'm not an outgoing or nice person naturally, but I still try not to be a prick to the kids because I remember more the people who went out of their way to be really cool to me when I was a kid. And there are people I don't talk to now, people who don't even play the game now, but I still have more memories of the positive stuff like that. So I try. I mean, there were times I'm just like kind of dismissive because I'm still bad with people at times, or I just don't have the inclination or the mental ability to deal with them anymore. But I'd still rather take the time out with them so that they actually remember those. I mean, I'm lucky that some of the people who were there when I was there are still in the game, so I can look at them and say, holy shit, that thing you did that was completely inconsequential to you 16 years ago meant a ton to me as a kid. And I would hope that in like 10 years, if one of these kids is still playing the game, is, hey, that bald guy who's normally an asshole to people, to his friends, and just yells fuck all the time. He was like really nice and showed me what I was doing wrong, or showed me how to build a sword, or something like that. And I hope that happens. Because I was the social pariah and outcast when I started this game. I was the prototypical nerd. And it meant too much to me. It means too much to me to let that kind of shit still happen.
Right.
If I see somebody being an unjustifiable prick to kids... Even if they're like, hey, chill the hell out or move on or like correct the behavior or get rid of it.
So it's more of, although we still have these dickheads and although we still have these people that are being mean to kids, ultimately kind of the wonder, what I'm getting from you guys is that the wonder and enjoyment those kids get from being weekend warriors overrides that, significantly. I know that's ultimately what it was for me, even though, I just talked about being picked on a lot and having to deal with like grumpy adults all the time. I had people like Randall that even though he made fun of my Amtgard name relentlessly, he would say, follow me around in a battle game or you go do this. And it was cool. I was like Randall's little soldier, and yeah, I mean, I guess that's what keeps kids in the game and allows them to grow up in the game, right?
Well, I think that's a weird little line because this entire generation of people, I mean, how often do we call each other cockstains or twat waffles or cunt flaps or anything else along that nature?
For sure, but there's a difference between talking shit amongst people that
Well, there's even the kids we didn't know that we named dumb shit like Captain Caveman and Helicopter Hammerhands and okay, Robocop's a badass name, even though he had no idea what I was saying when I called him Murphy.
Didn't we name a kid Tombstone at some point?
I don't remember. These are the three that I named off stayed with the game a long ass time, so I remember those kids. And they seem to take what we were doing as a sign of affection to them because that's what ultimately felt like we were doing, or at least when I was part of it. I was like, hey,
we probably could have channeled that more positively, though. But looking back on it, I think our sentiment was right, but we probably didn't need to call a kid Helicopter Hammerhands.
You were what, 19? It was hardly. I mean, it wasn't the Lynch Pinata at the time. I mean, he was still at least trying. I mean, he's like the efforts. Like, if Theodore threw me over his shoulder and hurt me, well, at least he was still trying to have a good time.
Right.
And I was just a frail little kid, but I mean, he ultimately didn't hurt, or somebody's like playfully and like throws a shot that knocked my ass over. It's still the intention is still important.
Right.
It is, or it should be. I think that when it works well, it works very well. When it works poorly, you have the impression of bullying, or you have people that feel like that they got that sense of wonder, they got that victory, they got that cool moment, and then some person who's a grown-up from their point of view, but from our point of view is like what you're just saying, like 19 years old or 20 years old or what have you, is being a dick to them and is ruining their moment of victory. And that's when it starts to fail, I think.
I don't know, I think that doesn't... I don't see that happening as much here, because we do have... Like, the 19-year-olds are almost the kids. I mean, you've got you and me in our 30s. I mean, you and me, Sane, Emmer in 30s and 40s, and other,
Gross.
Hell, like a third of our park is in our 30s. Like, a third of our really, really active park is 30 and up.
Yuck.
I think we also do things a little bit differently. I think that we treat people a little bit better.
Well, maybe we should use that as an example and start pushing it more instead of just saying, hey, we're doing this right. Why aren't we proselytizing? I never know if I'm saying that word right.
Proselytizing.
Yeah, like I say.
Why are we making prosthetics for people to wear?
Yeah, prosthetic brains that are stopped being assholes because they have real assholes. Well,
no, it is a definite culture that we have here at our park that is successful in treating people a little bit differently, and it would be nice if we could push that out. And I think that there are a few other parks in Dragonspine that do things that way, and it would be nice if we could make more people do it that way too.
So, how much of this goes into ESAM? For those that don't know, I don't know anybody that doesn't know now. Randall created ESAM and is known as one of the 3 R's. I think Ruth and Roger are the other ones. I don't know how prevalent that is now. It seemed very prevalent in like Amtgard Rockstar-y like 5-6 years ago.
That was before we had the good centralized online presence and Facebook and social networking as it is now. Now, that kind of stuff's so ubiquitous. Oh, Christ, me talking.
Ubiquitous.
I know how to say that one. I'm just tired now.
No, Facebook and things like that, you're right. I've started to kill off traditional methods of communication. The way that what have become the traditional methods of communication killed off what came before them. Before we had, for example, Dragonspin has the Yahoo groups, and then eSamurai existed. Before that, we had mailing lists and so on, and they killed those things right off. And now, in the last couple of years, Facebook has really come into its own as a central form of communication, and it's chaotic, and it's got many flaws. But it's where everybody is now. So a lot of older forms of communication, including eSamurai, are starting to go by the wayside. And I don't know if a lot of the attitude that we have at our park went into what eSamurai became. eSamurai has sort of a different ethos to it, a different approach.
Sure. And do you see that in the future, maybe in the near future or in the distant, eSam becoming obsolete?
I suspect possibly. It's going to have to change significantly for it to stay current.
How do you think that eSam can do that? Or are you interested in doing that, Ben?
Yes, but the difficulty that we have is that the thing that eSamurai started out as is it was 2 things. It was articles and it was forums. And the articles alone were never going to make it successful. They were my idea. The forums were Firen's idea, and they were what made it successful because Amtgard needed a place for central communication, and it became eSamurai for a very long time. And then Facebook came along and started to kill that out. So all eSamurai has that it can be successful based upon now is the article half of things. And that's something that is very much driven by what I write and what people send in to me. So if I'm not writing stuff and people aren't sending things in to me, then it's not going to be very prosperous. It's not going to be successful. But that's where it needs to continue to be pushed. And I'm trying to do integration and things like that with Facebook, like farming things out or linking things in. But there's really a limit to what it can be because if you look at the typical traffic on eSamurai on a given day versus the typical traffic on Facebook on a given day of Amtgarders, there's no contest, none whatsoever.
Well, it's I don't see Facebook completely taking over because I'm not going to subscribe to every goddamn kingdom's Facebook group, and some of them, I think even on our sublands, tried throwing a shit fit about you have to be an actual member of our land to be in our Facebook group. And I don't want to have, 12, 13 kingdoms worth of spam tell me things. But I want ESAM, I can just pop in a thread or just pop on the main forum and see, holy shit, events in my area or events on the calendar. In Facebook, I'd have to read way too many goddamn things I don't care about to get that.
So, since you've created ESAM to now, anything unsuspected happen? Like anything that to this day you're still just like, holy shit, I can't believe this came out of that.
A couple of things. I didn't expect it to be as successful as it was. I expected it to be sort of a smaller sort of forum. I figured people would be interested in the articles and they would come and discuss them and that sort of thing, but I didn't expect it to become as central as it was. I also didn't expect it to have any sort of official capacity in the game. It's an unofficial website. It's not owned by Amtgard. It's not run by Amtgard, but it hosts stuff that's run by Amtgard and owned by Amtgard, like the Rules Revision Forum and the Circle of Monarchs Forum. And it produced things that became official to Amtgard, like award standardization. All that discussion took place on eSam, right, in a private forum that we set up to discuss it. I didn't expect any of that to come about. And I certainly didn't expect it, like I said earlier, to become as successful as it is, or it was.
All right, so I'm going to start winding things down just because I think we're busting into an hour, maybe. Haven't been keeping that close a track on time.
Not really.
How much time have we been going?
Close to an hour.
Anyways, one thing that always kind of interests me is talking to other Amtgarders, and this is specifically something I want to ask you, Ben. And I was really interested in asking Thedro this, because he's a Dragonspine warlord from a different time. Like, I didn't even meet Thedro till last SKBC, but he's a Dragonspine warlord, right?
Yes.
And there's only a handful of us, like 7, I think.
There might be 9 or 10 of you now.
Almost 9 or 10?
But not very many. Less than a dozen for sure.
Right. But he comes from that different time, and you took like a 5-year break, right? When was that? In the early 2000s?
That was about when Jester was playing. It was from like 96 to 2000.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I was playing then because when I was 14-ish, and then once I got a job at Xeonet, and I go on Saturdays, you started going out to the park like religiously. Or you've been going out quite a bit, and then
Starting in 2000.
I got a job with your recommendation, and then I never got to go to the park again.
So, first of all, let me ask you this, Ben. What made you want to come out religiously, like Jester's saying again?
Well, I remember that actually pretty vividly. I was working at Xeonet. We were both working at Xeonet at that time,
I think you're going out decently before that. That's when you and I started talking again, because I'd mostly just hung out with your brother up till then.
In early 2000, I started trying to go out when I could, but I was working on Saturdays, so I'd have an occasional Saturday off. But the thing that really gripped me all of a sudden was I missed hitting people with foam swords. Like, in an amazing way and in a very sudden way. I was thinking to myself, I need to go to Apadaga Park and hit people with foam swords, because I know that they're still going to be there. There's going to be about 30 or 40 people at the park, and they're going to be doing that. And when I went out there, I think the first time I went out there, Farrell was king. It was in '99, and I fought one weekend there and had a blast. It was just like a fantastic time.
Yeah, I think I actually took you home that weekend.
And then I had to go. I couldn't go to the park after that. And then in I think it was maybe late '99 or early 2000, Krishan was king, and it was the same way. Went out for one weekend, had a really good time, and then the bosses changed my schedule again and said, no, we can't give you Saturdays off. So it wasn't until late, maybe mid 2000 that I got Saturdays off. But it was. I wanted to hit people. I wanted to go out and fight people. It was that aspect of it that I really, really missed.
And so, looking back at that time, looking now, what would you say are like the 5 most influential Amtgarders that have inspired you or kind of kept you driven throughout your time? I feel like Amtgard in general, this is something we may want to continue discussing, but I feel like it has definitely, especially with our award system and our knighthoods, kind of a cult of personality going on, and whether or not that's positive or negative, is right, the great debate for Amtgard. But I always find it interesting to ask people, well, who are your 5?
At that time or overall the whole period?
Looking back, let's say.
From 2000?
From now to whenever, or back then. because that could be interesting too to see like a younger, more bushy tail, bright eyed Randall, who was your influences then as opposed to now.
That's an interesting question. A lot of the people that I would have mentioned at the time don't play anymore, or we don't talk anymore, or what have you. But there would have been people like Foshan, who would have been around when you were playing Jester.
Yep,
He was
he
king
was
right around when you
king.
started.
He was the first king I'd vote for.
And he was, I would say he was the first of my generation that succeeded, but he was the first of my generation that conclusively succeeded. Because before that, Trent was champion, and before that, we had a few other people in office from my generation. But he was the first one that won, not only won, but defeated the people who came before him and said that what you're doing is no good. But there was Foshan. I remember Crosser being an inspiration because he was a goofy bastard. And a good goofy bastard who Jeremiah, Foshan knighted him, and the whole Knight Circle said, you're not going to do it, and he did it anyway. So that was someone
That's
else.
where Jacob learned that from.
Mm-hmm. And I really loved Jacob when I first met him, from the moment I met him as well. That's a good name to mention as well. That just this, because he was 16, I think, when I met him. It was in about 2000. He was 5 years younger. Maybe he was 17. I can't really remember, but he was someone else that had this very positive approach and a very grown-up approach. And he was someone who also recognized when there was a breakdown between the way that the adults were treating the kids and things were just not going the way they should be going, or when they were going well, he just recognized it very instinctively and understood it. I remember Lavender was a good inspiration as well. That's someone that we don't talk anymore, but at the time she was just such a hard worker. She had a very good philosophy of Amtgard that if you're a servant to the game and you take it really well and truly seriously, then you're the first one in and you're the last one out. And you pay attention to the little details. You really focus on those things. So those are people that really mattered a lot to me, and their approach really mattered a lot to me at the time. Although Jeremiah was not really playing when I came back in, and Crosser had moved to Ohio. In the time since then, I've mentioned people like Goldcrest, especially. Jason's one of the best people. I think he's one of the best knights in Amtgard, one of the best people in Amtgard.
He's definitely like whether you think knighthood is a positive or a negative thing, in the grand scheme of things, I think anybody can point to Goldcrest and say that guy is at least one. If there's only one, that guy is one of the good examples of what epitomes, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure, if we have to have knighthood, make sure we knight that guy.
And he takes it very seriously. To him, which is interesting, knighthood isn't just nebulous to the game. It's how he lives his life. Like, he even goes so far as to kind of like study books of chivalry, right? Like medieval texts.
Yeah.
Which is, crazy to me. But when I kind of think about it, well, like, how much time and effort did I put into getting good at fighting and looking at this as a sport? How much time and effort is he putting into being a good knight and improving that aspect of himself?
Absolutely. No, he's definitely one of the best, and he's on my list. From whichever era you want to put it in, he's on my list. It definitely changes with the eras, though, because there are people who don't play. Egil, for example. By the time I started playing again, he was no longer really active, but he was someone who was profoundly meaningful for me when I was very young in the game. I don't know how active he was when you were playing.
No, he was incredibly active. He was one of the. He was one of those people who would go way out of his way to make kids feel welcome. He was always Guildmaster of Monsters and whatnot, and I swear to God that spider costume Goob wears was made back when I was playing in a small little kid. I probably wore that thing.
Who else you got there, Randall? We're looking for 5.
We're looking for 5.
So if Jason Goldcrest is number 1, I guess, back then as to now.
That's hard to say.
Or maybe, who do you think is really like moving and shaking the game right now if you're having trouble?
Oh, right now, the names that I look to right now are profoundly different. Like, back then I would have looked for people like Jatara, like Wheelock, like Egil, people like that, or Jeremiah. And Jeremiah is even someone that in like this century as well, that if I have a problem or something that I'm working on, I'll call Jeremiah and say, here's our dilemma, can you make sense of it for us? But those are the names that I'll talk about right now. But these days I would talk to someone like Brennan right away, or Michael, or Goldcrest, people like that.
Yeah, Michael, I also get the that feeling of him whenever he goes to an event. Although he's kind of a prolific shit talker on the ditch field.
Well, that's good. That's a good quality.
He's also one of those guys that, I just look at him every time I see that guy playing Amtgard. I'm just like, holy shit, that guy is dorking out hard. He is having the best time right now, and it's infectious. It's like I want to smoke whatever he's smoking, to get to that point. But it's totally like a natural high with that guy. He's just overjoyed to be playing. And granted, I've only really known Mikey in like a event type scenario. I got to hang out with him just one-on-one, him and Yoto at SKBC. I think Diego was there too. So I got to know the guy a little bit more too. But like every time I see that guy, he's just balls to the wall.
Yeah, Michael's definitely on the list. Like outside of my personal circle of people like Amy or you two or Robert or people like that, I would definitely, if I'm looking for people further afield, I would talk to Michael because he seems like he's having such a good time every time he plays, and he's got such a long view and such a good sense. And I suspect many of the names that I'm mentioning are names that you had mentioned too, because they were people that were important during your generation as well, during that 5 years when, like from 95 to 2000.
I have a weird way of looking at my 5 because so many of the people I met became really, really important to my life outside of the game and meant more to me in growing as a person far more than growing as an Amtgarder. It doesn't mean as much to me, so it's hard for me to look at Amtgard growth as a whole because it's my personal life and how I've changed. Even 3 years ago, I wasn't as outgoing or I'm not going to say articulate, but more sociable or practiced in that way or caring. All those things have grown from the people I've met in the game. There are people who were important. I mentioned like the Thedro thing, and Egil was way above and beyond being like this. I remember back from when I was a small guy. I still have a weird mental image of being a small young kid, despite being in my 30s and 6'1", 210 pounds. I still have this 5'0", 80-pound scrawny nerd in my brain whenever I interact with people, and those that were nice to that, the Ran, Wheelox, Egils. Foshin was also one of the first people who actually, like, he was, I think, 19, 20 back then, and he made a point of just talking to this gangly, goofy-looking kid who seemed like he was having a bad day of it, and he made an effort, and that stuck with me forever. But now that I've grown more with the confidence in like looking at the big picture, that list is different. Like I don't really interact with Jason Goldcrest much. I know of him, I can recognize his work because it's just his, he's developed his style that's become his over the years. So I can't put him in my own top 5 because it doesn't impact. Okay, it probably impacts me the way that it impacts the entire game. That still comes down to me, but the personal parts of it mean far more to me, and that's why I try to be a decent guy to the kids, because that might mean more to them than I made this game a lot better by fixing these dumbass rules. I appreciate that. I'm not trying to slag on that by any means, but not being a dick and going out of your way to show kindness and decency to your gangly little nerd.
Because you might not remember that at all, and 15 years later, that's going to be like one of the most profound memories that kid has of Amtgard, and it might have impacted him in a major way.
Right, yeah. I told Thedro about throwing me over his shoulder, but he was extraordinarily drunk at Clan, so I don't know if he even remembers that conversation. He seemed really happy with it, but again, he was really drunk. I maybe could have gotten him to make out with me if I wanted to.
Weird. I know what you mean. Back when Finn and I were just starting Wheel, through Randall, we got to know Brennan, and even though he's never been like an official member of the company, I don't know, we used to invite him to all our company meetings and just like sit down and pick his brain for hours.
Well, you guys even had Cheshire at the start of Wheel. I mean, one of the grumpiest fucks known to men. And he was still cool to you guys, and it still matters.
Yeah, if I had to have a top 5 of all time that was just completely personal to me, even though I felt like Cheshire was kind of also just weirded out the fact that he was hanging out with these like 15, and because it was me and Jeff Finn.
Yeah.
Even though he was like, and he was your like stereotypical or not even stereotypically, he was like the epitome of this just like curmudgeonly,
He was
grumpy Amtgarder.
Me and him would
Under it
sit.
all,
Me and him would sit and make fun of people.
Yeah.
We were the grumpy corner before Steve started
Under it
being
all.
my grumpy corner.
Carl was just like a big softy, and you could tell he really, really loved the game. And you know, he kind of took us under his wing, and like we went over to his house a lot and hung out in his garage, and he would show us like all these different swords he made from like different generations of Amtgarders, from like 80s great weapons to like now. He's actually the reason there is a wheel company right now, although he never got to see the fruits of his labor, because, you know, he, or rather the seeds that he planted grow, he moved to Georgia, I think, or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I mean, that's Brennan, him, you know, just taking the time. Who else you got, Randall?
I want to add Curse to that list.
Yeah,
I think
Tim's a
that
badass.
I think Tim's done more for the game than most people realize, because he is fairly secluded as far as Amtgard goes. A lot of Amtgard people that when you talk about names are travelers, they move around a lot, and Tim goes to El Paso and Clan, not a whole lot more.
He didn't really visit us that much.
I think he's done more than most people understand for the game, and he's such an articulate and intelligent and educated bruiser that the way that he's let the game grow by taking control of things in El Paso and letting things evolve the way that they did and guiding that evolution, I'm very impressed by what he's done. He's sort of
Wasn't Yeltsin the guy that tore down the wall?
yeah, it was the transition person. I'm not saying Tim's a crazy alcoholic.
I'm a giant birthmark or anything.
No, I was going a lot more for I think it was Gorbachev, but I was going a lot more
It was it Gorbachev or Yeltsin? I get him fucked up.
I was going more for warrior poet. That he's like a big thug,
Tupac.
basically. He's a Tupac. He's a big thug.
He's Tupac.
But he is so intelligent and so articulate.
He's a really smart
and
guy.
so educated, and he's such a good communicator that he has presided during his time in charge of the Burning Lands over a critical period for Amtgard, when Amtgard was basically, well, it was like 18 something years old, 20 years old or so, and it was like in that kind of age period, and it grew up under his tutelage.
I remember when I
He
came
did.
back in like 2004, 2005. Before that, it was known as fucking Burning Lands. Like anytime you had to interact with them, because you had your JW in that era that lasted for fucking ever. And when he showed around, I'd roll my eyes at Burning Lands. People would go, "What? Why the hell are you doing that?" And they're like, "They're okay people."
Yeah, they're our friends now.
What the hell are you talking about? And they showed up like 3 weeks later. I'm like, "Oh, I don't know what the hell happened to the assholes I thought I knew. They're gone. This is great."
Well, I think a lot of that was Tim. He
Yeah.
really worked hard on the traveling and traveling locally at any rate,
Yeah.
but also visiting people, and that communication online was so important, and in handling those new groups. For a very long time, that voice that they heard was Tim's voice for new groups.
Yeah, it was just a drastic turnaround. Like I'd almost pissed in a church when I was like talked crap about the BL in comparison to what it was before that.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about a guy too, just in the same vein as Cheshire or Carl. You know, just looks can be very deceiving, and that's one of the things I love about this game. You know, is that you meet all these different people from all these different walks of life. That ultimately you really get to know them. You know, you get to know how good of a person they are, and Tim is definitely one of those guys where, fuck me, I was scared to death of that guy when I was like 17, because he's got all the tats and he's huge and he hits like a brick shit house. You know, this big bad warlord from BL, and then I kind of get to know him. I'm just like, holy crap, this guy is a really nice guy, you know, and he's a really cool guy too. Like I enjoy just sitting around shooting the shit with that guy a lot.
When I was 15, Amtgard was a bouncer with a big ass mohawk. He came to our park, and people
And he's
were
only gotten creepier.
and people were like, the adults were terrified of this man, and the kids didn't give a shit because he actually knew how to calibrate himself, and he was just
Right.
the big softy we all know and love now.
Yeah.
But he still had that image of, holy shit, I'm getting taken out back and raped. No, not at all. Cuddled, maybe. But
Anybody else you want to add to that list, Ben?
I think I'm good. It's a
Think
good
you're
list.
good? What about you, Tony?
it's mostly personal growth, so I can't really
Yeah.
do a lot without just waxing about my personal life, and this isn't live journal.
Right.
No one uses that
Still
shit
around,
anymore.
right? No, wow. Blast from the past.
I'm fucking old. I remember LiveJournal.
Okay, well, unless you guys want to continue going, we can end it there.
Nope. I gotta work tomorrow morning.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys again from the bottom of my heart for being on the Stabchats. It's been a good second episode.
You should do more of these with Skype.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about that. Brennan and I have talked about that a lot. We have, like, I think Cisco WebEx as something that we can possibly use. He has an account.
There are dozens of things that you can use
Yeah.
with it.
It's definitely on my mind. I kind of enjoy selfishly getting to just sit around with my buds that I don't get to see that often and shooting the shit like this, because it's rare for me nowadays that I don't live around you guys. But either way, thanks for being on the podcast, and hopefully there will be an episode number 3.
Sure. Thanks for hosting us. Do more.
Alrighty, dude. Cheers. Wink. All right. Adios.